but quickly expanded my creative duties. I bonded with the core group of filmmakers at the studio and made myself indispensable, but an animator I was not. When John Lasseter took me aside and asked me to direct Toy Story 3, I was excited and I was flattered, and then I wanted to vomit. Because John was not only asking me to direct the 11th Pixar film in a string of unbroken hits, but he was also asking me to direct a sequel to two of the most beloved films of all time. No pressure. But the thing that freaked me out the most, honestly, the thing that I felt least equipped to pull off, was directing the animation. I had only marginal contact with the animators over the years and viewed them as curiosities. I understood what they did from a technical standpoint, but I didn't really understand the intangibles of what they did. The graceful conveying of weight, the added entertainment, the illusion of life. What made matters worse was that I was stepping in on the heels of them having worked with some incredible directors, John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter, and most intimidating, Brad Bird, who, as you know, is a walking encyclopedia of animation history. Now, granted, there were still a handful of animators around from Pixar's early days, people who I counted as my friends, but by and large, the current animation staff was completely new to me. I imagined them as a tight-knit pack of wolves, wary of outsiders, who would greet me with narrow, suspicious eyes. It was vital that I somehow gain their trust, but I felt more than ever that I was completely out of place in animation. I really felt destined to fail before I'd even begun. I suppose I could have turned to booze to solve my problems, as many of our animators do each and every Friday night. But I had a film to make. The main thing I did was deciding early on not to pretend to know things I didn't know. I was completely upfront with everyone about my insecurities. I wore my heart on my sleeve. And rather than chew me up and spit me out, the animators cautiously listened. Slowly, day by day, their trust in me grew. I never told them how to do their jobs. I never told them how to animate. I just communicated as clearly as possible what was important to me and what I thought was important for the film. But I left it to them to interpret the material in their own way. If a walk cycle looked funny, I didn't tell them how to fix it. I couldn't have if my life depended on it. I just told them it looked strange to me and left them to fix it. If Woody's facial expression wasn't quite communicating the emotion of a scene, I didn't draw a picture of what I wanted. Instead, we discussed what was going on in Woody's mind, the conflicting thoughts in his head, and I left it to them to bring the moment to life. I spoke with them the same way I would speak to an actor, because, of course, you animators are actors. Each morning's public animation dailies were a gut-wrenching test. Would I know what to say? Would I suggest something completely stupid and idiotic? I was walking a tightrope without a net, but every day I got a little better and a little more confident. The animators fed off my utter passion for the film and did everything in their power to help me achieve my vision. And by the end of the film, lo and behold, the department that I was most intimidated by, the department I felt the most distance from, was the department that I became the closest with. The animators welcomed me as one of their own. Steve Jobs once told me that looking back on his career, the things he was the most proud of were the things that were created under the most difficult conditions, the things that seemed absolutely impossible to pull off. And I now have enough projects under my belt to know that he was absolutely right. I am really, really proud of Toy Story 3, but it was, by far, the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, and it's perhaps the hardest thing I will ever do. Don't be afraid of the impossible. Don't be afraid to fail. You will fail again and again, but those failures will make your work stronger and make you a better person. Now, the second story I want to tell you is about life. I've talked in the press about many things from my personal life that managed to worm their way into Toy Story 3, not the least of which was the time I accidentally threw away a garbage bag filled with my wife's beloved childhood stuffed animals. True story. But there's one story I haven't talked about much because it's very personal. But it's a story that I think infused the film with one of its most tender, affecting moments. 16 years ago, when I was editing the first Toy Story film, I got a phone call that my grandmother, who I was very close to, had developed lung cancer, despite never having smoked a cigarette in her life. Worse, it was believed that she might only have weeks or even days to live. My wife and I jumped on the next plane and flew back home to Cleveland, where I got to spend several great days hanging out and talking with my grandma. It was tough because she was completely lucid and as loving as she'd ever been. But what hung in the air, unspoken, was the undeniable truth that she wasn't going to be around much longer. Inevitably, the day came that I needed to head back to Pixar to continue working on the film. Before heading to the airport, I dropped my grandmother off at her friend's birthday party at a local restaurant. I wheeled her wheelchair to the center of the room, where she was immediately surrounded by friends and family. She was the center of attention. I kissed her on her cheek, hugged her, and said goodbye, as I had countless times before. But this time, I knew it was the last time. I was really, truly saying goodbye. Strangely, she didn't seem to sense the finality of the moment. Distracted by her friends, she said goodbye to me as if we were going to be seeing each other again the next afternoon. I thought about saying something, stressing to her the importance, the finality of the moment, but then I realized it was much better this way. She was surrounded by her friends, having a wonderful time, and why shouldn't this goodbye be just like any other? I stood up and walked to the door of the restaurant, where I paused, turned back, and I looked at her one last time. All my senses heightened, knowing that this was the last time I would lay eyes upon her. She sat in her wheelchair, beaming, laughing at something Fred had just said to her, and at that moment I took a mental snapshot of that image. Click. And then I squeezed my eyes shut and I turned away, leaving her forever. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to say goodbye that day and to capture that image in my mind. She's long gone now, of course, but I will forever have that picture of her, living, smiling, available to me at a moment's notice. At the end of Toy Story 3, after Andy has given Woody and Buzz and the rest of his toys to Bonnie and had one last glorious playtime, he gets into his car to leave. But before he drives off, he turns and he gazes upon his toys one last time. He soaks in the Potato Heads and Rex and Slink and Ham and Jessie, and then his gaze wanders up to Buzz and Woody, nestled in the arms of their new caretaker. He takes a mental snapshot of his friends before quietly thanking them and driving away forever. Now, the audience doesn't know he's taking a mental snapshot at that moment, and they don't know the story of my grandmother. But I do, and you can be certain that K.C. Royer, the animator who brought Andy to life in that shot, knew. He knew because I told my story to all the animators who worked on that scene, and I'm certain it brought a depth of humanity to the moment that wouldn't have been present if I'd merely said to him, you know, Andy's looking back wistfully at his toys one last time. I think the most important piece of advice that I can leave you with today is to infuse your work with life. I don't mean bring things to life. You wouldn't be sitting here today if you didn't already know how to do that. What I mean is to put as much real life into your work as possible. Things you've experienced, things that have moved you, affected you, changed you. We're all wandering through our lives experiencing different things, but we're all sharing a common human experience. Find ways to touch base with that in your work, and you will affect not just a few people, but a lot of people. I've just finished traveling the world and showing Toy Story 3 to many different people from many different cultures. I've seen the tears in people's eyes and the smiles on their faces, and know firsthand the effect the film's simple messages of friendship, hope, trust, and faithfulness have had on audiences the world over. I wish you all the best of luck as you follow your passion to become animators, givers of life. Make sure your work is filled with life, and you will have only success. Now, get out there and do it. No pressure. Congratulations.